This is Front and Nationwide on the Athletic Podcast Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Front and Nationwide. Aaron Portzine with you here on what is this, Wednesday morning? The Blue Jackets with the big, greasy, but big 3-2 win over the Philadelphia Flyers last night in Philadelphia. Wow. Hey, guys, the Blue Jackets are in second place in the Metro Division today. They are ahead of the Pittsburgh Penguins. They are, in fact, imagine that if the season ended today, the Blue Jackets would host the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first round of the playoffs. The Blue Jackets have never finished higher than third in their division, be it the Central way back or the Metro now. They've never had home ice advantage in the playoffs. Think about that. So welcome to Front Nationwide. We've got a guest today again. Dylan Tyrer of the Blue Jackets radio host will be with us to talk all that's going on. One thing I really want to scratch at here is I've heard this in a few places. I've thought this myself. I kind of want to breathe that out a little bit. Is this team built for the playoffs? That seems like a very strange conversation to have about a franchise that's won one best of 7 playoff round. They also won a qualifying round over Toronto. Lots of people conveniently forget that. But they've only made it to the second round of the NHL playoffs one time in their previous 24 seasons. And here we are debating whether they are a built for the playoffs type team. I kind of think that they are. And we'll get into that with Dylan. Last night, Jet Greaves was amazing in the first period. I'm not sure Jet Greaves is quite getting the attention that he deserves around this league. 13th in the league in wins, even though he's only played, I think it's 46 games. 10th best or 11th best in save percentage. Top 10 in expected goals saved above expected, according to Money Puck. So he's had a really, really good year. And, I think it was Elvis Merzlikins who said, do you really think he's going to play 50, 60 games this season? Sure looks like it. It sure looks like it is, because it looks like he's back to being the guy again. And it should be. He's been on an absolute tear, 12-1-2 in his last 15 starts. Looked this up this morning. Well, you know the numbers. You're probably tracking them like everybody else. The Blue Jackets under Rick Bowness, hired on January 12th, are 19-3-4. That is 42 out of a possible 52 points. That's crazy. They have won 19 games in 26 outings under Bowness. They were at 19 wins in 45 games when Bowness was hired back on January 12th. Fire along your questions. Ask Porty. Use the hashtag AskPorty. I'll get to as many as I can. Some notes here. Charlie Alec, defenseman taken in the second round of the 2024 draft. It'll be announced later today. We had this yesterday. He's going to be joining his team. Tri-City of the Western Hockey League is done for the season. They did not make the playoffs. Alec is going to join Cleveland. Not sure if he plays Thursday. They next play Thursday. They host Grand Rapids. Not sure if he draws in for that. But he's going to turn pro. He signed an entry-level deal last spring, so he is good to go. Also, Owen Griffin may be in the works as well. Not sure how that is going to work. It doesn't seem quite as cut and dried as Alec. Now, Griffin was just drafted last year, so he still has the option to go back to junior. So yeah, we'll get to Dylan here momentarily. Look this number up too. When I talk about them being built for the playoffs, I think of a couple of things. I think of their size. I think they're one of the larger teams in the league. We can get the data on that for sure. But I think of the way they're built down the middle right now, and I've talked about this a lot. If you've been a fan of the Blue Jackets for a long time, you recognize the struggles that they've had down the middle of the ice. My God, for the first 15, 20 years of the organization, 23 years of the organization, it was a real struggle. They were at a disadvantage, not on every line, but certainly by depth over the course of a game. And it's changed so dramatically here. Boone Jenner 2 years ago was this team's number one center. Now he's the fourth line center, right? And when you've got Fantilli, who, by the way, has come a really long way defensively under Rick Bowness, you've got Fantilli, Monahan, Coyle, and Jenner down the middle. That is really, really good, really, really competitive. I like their size on the wings. That second line, I think, is going to be in and out the rest of the year in terms of ice time. It could be a difficult line in the playoffs, too. I think that's the one line that Rick Bowness would agree. He has to be careful with how to use it and in what settings, because Johnson and Garland on either side both have played pretty darn well here, and they're both bringing up, Garland especially, that sort of competitiveness is just intrinsic to his game. I think Johnson's been a lot more competitive. But I think they got to be careful with that line a little bit defensively. But down the middle, this team is as solid as it's ever been. One of the better teams depth-wise all the way through, I think, in the NHL. The other thing I like is just how they've played under Rick Bowness. I looked this up today. In 26 games under Bones, 19-3-4, at 5-on-5 play. Now that's the barometer that many statistical analysis are run by. Because it's the one that's the same for everybody. They've allowed 40 5-on-5 goals in 26 games. That's about 1.5 per game. That's crazy. And it's the lowest in the league since that span, since January 12th. Shows you how difficult they have been to play against. And I think I've said this before. I think Rick Bowness feels like he's got 3 lines that can score. I think he feels like he's got 3 lines that can check. And the 3 lines that can score, I would say, are the Fantilli, the Monahan, and the Coyle lines. Having said that, the Jenner line with Lundstrom and Heinen have chipped in quite a bit here the last few games. The 3 lines I think he can check with would be 1, 3, and 4. Again, I think he's got to be careful with his usage with the Monahan, Johnson, Garland line. But I think that's a really good situation to be in as a coach. So yeah, we'll get to all of these things. We'll chat with Dylan Tyrer. Again, we'll get your AskPorty questions in here. So let's get to it. And again, thanks for being with us. Up next is Dylan Tyrer. All right, joined now by Dylan Tyrer. Dylan, thanks for being with us. Thanks for joining us on Front Nationwide. What's going on in your world, and what did you think of that 3-2 win in Philadelphia last night by the Blue Jackets?
Well, Porty, thanks for having me. It's great to be a guest with you for the first time here. Not much going on other than cheering on the Blue Jackets and hoping this team makes it into the Stanley Cup playoffs. That game yesterday against the Philadelphia Flyers, I was thinking to myself after the first period, this really feels like it needs to be a Zach Werenski game. Like these games where the Blue Jackets look a little bit sluggish, I'm always thinking, all right, who's the guy that's going to step up? It's got to be Zach, right? Yeah. And little did I know, 44 seconds into that second period, he sets up Matthew Olivier, who's really found that goal scorer's touch. Yeah, no doubt. Then a little while after that, Zach himself finds the back of the net. I think he broke, a 12-game goalless streak in doing that. So, yeah, he's the guy that stepped up. And I was thinking in my mind that whole time, it's got to be Z, right?
Yeah. And if it weren't a Jet Greaves game, too, that game could have been 3-0, 4-0 in the first period. Crazy. One thing that struck me with, I think, the Islanders game and this one in the first period, they got it together in this one. Life is different when you are protecting a playoff spot as opposed to coming for one. And I feel like the Islanders they were out of it and got their way back into it against the Blue Jackets. The Flyers are in desperation mode here. Still not out of it, but boy, they really need to get points. there's a desperation there that I just don't know if you can organically match if you're in a spot versus if you don't have it. And how much have you seen that or felt that the last two games?
Yeah, and the shoe is on the other foot, right? Because the Blue Jackets were that team chasing it this time
100%.
last year, and they loved that. I thought it was pretty telling before the game. I listened to Travis Konechny's media availability, and he was essentially saying that the Flyers were playing with house money going into that game, and it's easier to play that way. You're just freed up. And
Yeah.
that was really the thing for me going into that Islanders game. I was curious to see what the Blue Jackets looked like because, quite frankly, they were in a position they haven't been in quite some time, right? I think you tweeted it out after the win last night that this is the highest the Blue Jackets have been in the standings since 2017. So, for all intents and purposes, the large majority of this Blue Jackets roster has never been in this position before where they're, protecting a spot in the top 3 in the Metropolitan Division. So, it's not even really like I thought the Blue Jackets handled it poorly in that game against the Islanders. It's just like whenever those teams play, it seems to be a slog,
Yeah.
particularly when it's on the island. So even though the Blue Jackets lost that game and didn't score, I don't think my panic level or my alarm was that high after that game. I said, all right, let's back off here. Let's wait to see what the Blue Jackets look like on the road in Philly. And I think them being on the road for all of this adds another level to it in
Sure.
protecting, I guess we'll call it a lead right now, a points advantage. So
Right.
I thought they responded really nicely. Whatever it was that Rick Bowness said between the first and second periods seemed to dial the Blue Jackets in. And it was like, hey, we know what we are. We know who we are. You guys have proven that. Now let's do it on the road. Now let's do it when we're in a playoff spot. And I thought they stepped up in a huge way, particularly in the second and third periods.
Yeah. Now, Bonus has this, he's a very congenial man. I think anybody can get along with Rick Bonus. It's very conversational. There's nobody who's been behind a bench and in professional sports as long as he is, 71 years old. He's got it in him to light up a room.
Yeah.
Too, right? And he's got to pick his spots. Everybody does. He knows when to, of course. But could you see that side of him? I got the sense from what he said that a lot of the players in the room did the talking last night too. But every once in a while, you catch Bonus on the bench and the smile isn't there, and you go, "Ooh, I don't know if I want to see that side of him because it could be pretty intimidating."
Yeah, little birdie told me that he gave a very, very good speech during the intermission of that game last night. So, I am with you. Like, I think Rick Bowness, the fact that Bones was an assistant coach for so long, I think positions him even differently now than head coaches in the NHL, given that, he has been an NHL head coach for quite some time, but he's been an assistant coach, longer than anybody, right? Like in
Right.
the assistant coach, the way they always talk about it is, the assistant is more so the player's friend. Like he's the guy that you talk to when you're not in the lineup or when you're struggling with your role, whatever the case. And Bones has even talked about that. The way that he approaches being an NHL head coach, he thinks back to when he was a player and what he wishes the coach was like, and he tries to be that. So I think Bones, like, the communication, everybody talks about that, right? I still think he approaches being a head coach with the mindset of, the assistant in that regard, but
Yeah.
he also has the ability to sit in that big chair. And I think, like you said, he can light up a room when he has to. And I think he really picks his spots. Like, I think there's no panic in Rick Bowness, right? And why would there be? Like you said, he's
Oh,
71 years old. It's not like he's coaching for his job or anything like
right.
that. He knows what this is. So I think he has the ability to pick those spots, and he has his finger on the pulse. He has been around the game for a long time. So I think he's keenly aware and acutely aware of when things are starting to go south or sour a little bit in a room. And that's when he steps in. And maybe that was the case for the Blue Jackets after the first period against Philly.
I always think it's a strange thing too. And I remember that like during the Blue Jackets, what was it, 16-game winning streak, there's that
Yeah.
stretch at the beginning of a streak like that where, geez, maybe you stole a couple. There's the long stretch where you're just a dominating team and everything's working well. And then there's the few games at the end where you're like, boy, they really didn't deserve to win that game. Like this is, and you almost see signs, the cracks before the magic starts to fade a little bit. And I think the key for a really good team is to win last night's game, right? Is to keep that game on the island 1-0. These are the kind of games. There's going to be some ugly ass games the rest of the way. There's going to be ugly games in the playoffs. It's brutal. I don't mean brutal as in ugly necessarily. That's a redundant comment, but brutal in terms of the physicality of it. There's just no space. I've seen teams the last couple of games specifically, Islanders and Flyers, go after Marchenko and go after Werenski. They've been more physical on them than they've been in the past. The Blue Jackets have got to be ready for this. Agreed?
Yeah, and I would say I think the Blue Jackets are probably built for that, right? Like you've got Matthew Olivier, who we get to see him in the playoffs for the first time if the Blue Jackets are able to make it. Curious to see what that looks like, right? Yeah. You have Eric Goodbranson, who's tested on that blue line. He's a big body, a physical presence. I know Mason Marchment doesn't necessarily fight, but he's a chippy guy, an agitator, a guy that I don't necessarily know you want to get under his skin in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Connor Garland, while being undersized, I still think he's built for that. You've got Boone Jenner, who has that in him. You've got Cole Stillinger, who has that in him. And apologies to any of the other guys if I'm forgetting about them. I mean, Damon Severson has honestly shown a little bit of a mean streak this season. Yeah, Fantilli's got that in his game. Fabro dropped the gloves, even though it was a wrestling match in the game against Philadelphia. So, you know, I do think the Blue Jackets are built for this. Like you think back a few seasons ago when at that point Dean Evison's Minnesota Wild pounded the Blue Jackets, and Jarmo Kekalainen responded by acquiring guys like Eric Goodbranson and Matthew Olivier. So, you know, I think this team, while they haven't been in the playoffs together and experienced that sort of physicality and, as you stated, the nightly slog that it is, I think the Blue Jackets are built for it. And I think with Rick Bonus's playoff experience, they'll be ready for it. Yeah.
Using the phrase built for it, we were just talking about their physical play. Beyond the physical aspects of the postseason, I keep hearing and I keep thinking it myself a little bit, just given the way that they're put together, especially down the middle at forward, at center ice, that this team is built for the playoffs. And I love their scoring depth. I like the way that they're comprised as forwards. I would really like it if they could figure out a way to get Voronkov in there and playing as Dmitry Voronkov. It's crazy. I understand it because it's working right now, and Dan Heinen's been really good on that fast fourth line. But it's really bizarre to look at 17 goals sitting in the press box in 9 of the last 10 games. That just hasn't happened around here. Dylan, do you think this team is built for the playoffs? And if so, what does that mean to you? How do you see that?
Yeah, I honestly think it is. And, you know, first and foremost, I just think the Eastern Conference is so wide open that the Blue Jackets have the ability to compete with anybody. But if you look at the depth and the construction of the roster, I think it matches up pretty nicely, particularly when you look at the bottom six for the Blue Jackets. And I think you've seen those mismatches at times in the last couple of weeks. Like the Blue Jackets' third line is a horrible mismatch for some teams in the NHL. You know, you think about the game they played against Carolina, the third line dominated Carolina in that one. Then you look at the matchups, you know, with the New York Rangers, for example, where the Blue Jackets' fourth line was a horrible mismatch. And I know the Rangers aren't a playoff team, but you know, I think the Blue Jackets will find their opportunities that way. And the thing that I'm curious to see is, it might be cliche to say that a guy is a playoff player, but there are some guys like that their games just come alive in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Maybe the Blue Jackets have some characters like that. You know, is it a Boone Jenner, who we haven't seen in the playoffs for a long time? Is it a Mason Marchment, who's going to be playing a bigger role with the Blue Jackets in the playoffs than he was with a Florida or a Dallas? Is it a Dmitry Voronkov? We have absolutely no idea. Totally. But, you know, I just think the Blue Jackets' depth speaks to that. And I think the move to put Boone Jenner at center on the fourth line was an indicator by Rick Bowness that he believes this is a playoff team. And if we are going to go to the playoffs, this is what it's going to look like, because you need that depth down the middle. I think the Blue Jackets' first line will honestly be challenged in a playoff series because Adam Fantilli will be playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs for the first time, likely against a good centerman that's been there before, but that's a great growing opportunity for him. Sean Monahan is going to have to step up in a big way in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I do personally feel like there's still a little bit of concern with Kent Johnson. We have no idea what a guy like that, a smaller guy that has had his struggles this season, will look like in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Heck, maybe he thrives. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see what that second line looks like. Yeah. I think the third line is a bona fide. Like, Charlie Coyle's been to the playoffs every year of his NHL career. I don't have any concern there. Frankly, I don't have any concern with the Blue Jackets' fourth line. Most of the unknowns are in that top six as far as the playoffs are concerned. But while the Blue Jackets don't have those flashy names like some of the other teams, I do think their depth speaks volumes and will showcase itself in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Connor Garlands of the world, the Mason Marchments of the world, the Boone Jenners, et cetera, et cetera. Guys like that always seem to step up and score big goals in the playoffs. So if the Blue Jackets are able to do it, I'm very eager and excited to see who that is.
The thing I love about playoff hockey is you get to see, usually it's around game 3 or 4 where teams really start to get a handle on how they can match up.
Yes.
And what works best. And then it's a matter of who's best at that, who can get through that. I just really wonder, you mentioned Kent Johnson. I would go even larger than that. I would go across the whole line because I think Monahan, I think he's been better. He's back to making those sort of little special plays that you only sometimes see on replay. He's been better since the break. Garland on his right is interesting, but there have been some games where that line's gotten lost just because of the matchups, of the situation. If there's a ton of penalties in both directions. I'm curious to see what that line looks like and if that line could stay together if the Blue Jackets are fortunate enough to get into the postseason. You have any thoughts on that, Dylan?
Yeah, that's honestly where my mind goes too. Just the uncertainty around Kent Johnson with the production this season, his size and strength when it comes to playoff hockey. I mean, you could make that same argument for Connor Garland, given he's a smaller guy and overall has not produced this season. He's produced goal scoring wise with the Blue Jackets, though. And for being a smaller guy, I do think he is extremely strong and combative and physical. I think Sean Monahan is the big question and really the linchpin there, because if he can take his game to another level in the Stanley Cup playoffs, I think that line will be okay, right? He needs to be the driver of that line the way that he was for the Blue Jackets last season. I know his health has been a question and a concern at times this season. That always seems to maybe take a back seat when it comes to the Stanley Cup playoffs and guys find another gear. So I think, Sean Monahan's productivity, his speed, his creativity, his playmaking, all of that will be a large focus going into the Stanley Cup playoffs because, that could be a mismatch when it comes to a playoff series, right? One way or another. Sure. If that line's producing, it could be a huge benefit to the Blue Jackets. And if it's not, that could be an issue. The good news is the Blue Jackets' third line has produced like a second line at times this season. So maybe you could put a Band-Aid on that. But, to your point about Kent Johnson and 3, 4, 5 games into a series, we find out about a guy and find out about matchups. That's kind of how I feel about Adam Fantilli because, game 1 or 2, he could be swimming. And then, game 3, game 4, game 5 hits, you might see a completely different player out there where something clicks for him. Yep. And, it's not even the Adam Fantilli that we saw score 31 goals this season. Right. It's, welcome to the NHL, welcome to playoff hockey, Adam Fantilli. So that's another thing I've got my eyes on because, if you recall, when he was drafted by the Blue Jackets, the guys that he said he wanted to play like were the Alexander Barkovs, the Nathan McKinnons, the Matthew Tkachuks. And the draft happens right after the Stanley Cup playoffs. So he just got done watching all those guys. And, that you watch playoff hockey, and that's when you say, okay, I want to play like this guy. So maybe we see a little bit more of that.
Yeah, and here it comes. We haven't talked about Jet Greaves in terms of the playoffs. And I'm not, maybe it should be, I'm not, this would be obviously his first NHL playoff activity. That doesn't worry me at all, really, just given his demeanor. You know what I'm saying? I guess we'll find out. But when the games start, if their Blue Jackets are able to hold on. But one of the things that really impressed me this year about him is he hasn't given up many bad goals, but when he does, it doesn't turn into a second bad goal. He just seems so calm and he has a very, very powerful mental eraser where it's just on to the next thing. Would you have any reservations? And it clearly looks like he's the guy here again. Now he's starting to get all of the starts if they're not back to back. Any reservations or any curiosities about him going into the playoffs for the first time again, if the Jackets are fortunate enough to make it?
I wish I could say that I was concerned or was curious about some things, but Jet Greaves is so steady. And you also have to remember he has considerable playoff experience in the American Hockey League as well. So it's not necessarily a first-time thing for him to be playing postseason hockey. You know, I wish I could come up with something about Jet, but he is what he is. Like, you look at the guy and he is what he is. The numbers are what they are. And to your point, like, Jet never gets pulled from games because he doesn't let anything snowball or balloon.
Right.
It's one goal here or a bad goal there, and it kind of stops there, right? You're surprised when he gives up a bad one and he doesn't give up another. He is just so steady. He is so focused. And I think he has the tendency to step up in bigger games, if you know what I mean. Like, you think about the hockey down the stretch that he came in and played for the Blue Jackets last season. He was dynamite in must-win games.
Big time.
His last 5 or so here, he's allowed 2 or less goals in 4 of the 5 games. In the 5th, he gave up 3, and it was a Blue Jackets win against the Rangers. So, I mean, I don't really have any concerns about Jet Greaves. I guess maybe the one thing, but like I said, he played in the AHL, a fatigue factor of just playing nonstop in the playoffs. He has been spelled at times throughout the regular season with Elvis Merzlikins. Like, when it's all said and done, Elvis is going to play, 25, 30-ish games this year.
Yeah.
So, Jet hasn't seen like a massive workload, but the way that he prepares and the way that he's ready, I really don't have too many concerns. I mean, I was thinking about it after the game last night. We really need to do a deep dive into how the Blue Jackets found this guy, because I remember when Manny Legacy was the Blue Jackets goaltending coach, he was talking a little bit about Jet Greaves and, what he projected for him in the future. But it's not like Jet was a particularly good goalie statistically playing junior hockey. So I guess the Blue Jackets they just saw the athleticism. They saw, they heard about the person that this guy was, and they found something, because for an undrafted guy that did not have good junior numbers, the guy is analytically a top 10 goalie in the NHL right now.
And I think it's such an interesting process, because I think the Blue Jackets signed him thinking that he could be a really good minor league goalie for them. Right.
Yeah, I always thought Jet would be a good backup in the NHL as he progressed in the minors.
And I think you probably would have been considered the optimist in the group in saying that among some people. Nothing against Jet, just the reality of what it was. I think them not viewing him as a prospect benefited them, because it allowed him to just stay in Cleveland and work and play and just play it out and get all of that experience, rather than to be rushed up here and juggled around. Like, it's almost like they developed him the right way because they didn't think they were developing, if that makes any sense at all. Strange.
It's kind of a fascinating idea that you bring up there, and I compare it to Blue Jackets drafted goaltending prospects right now, where Elvis Merzlikins, Jarmo Kekalainen called him the best goaltender in the world outside of the NHL, I believe, or that was at least the word around Elvis before he came over. Now, the Blue Jackets drafted Evan Gardner in the 2nd round. They drafted Sergei Ivanov a few years back in the 5th round. They obviously drafted Peter Andrianov in the first round this past year in 2025.
Yeah.
None of those guys you're like, oh my God, this is the next big thing, or oh my God, this guy's got to get here now, right? It's kind of that low key, under the radar, same style that we're talking about with Jet Greaves,
Yeah.
whereas Elvis was a little bit more hyped up. Jonas Corposalo was always called, this guy's a future starter in the NHL, whatever. It's just maybe a little bit different mindset or different narrative that takes pressure off of these guys. And goaltending is a little bit of a crapshoot. So
Sure is.
I think that's a smart way to go about it, if that's intentional by the Blue Jackets, to keep these goalies maybe a little bit more under the radar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and part of them being under the radar is they're under 6 feet tall. Almost all of them. Andrianov, I think, is probably, well, according to the Athletic, Scott Wheeler, is their second best prospect. Now he's 2030 before he's seen.
It's going to be a while.
It's going to be a while. Gardner turns pro next year, next season. Actually, could turn pro as soon as this WHL playoffs is over.
Yeah.
Ivanov is going to be in North America next year, most likely. But they're all 6 feet and under. So there's going to be a lot of turnover, a lot of churn, if you will, underneath the NHL level at that position. It's going to be interesting to see. I'm not sure where Gardner plays next year. I would bank on Ivanov, if he's coming over, is going to be at least in Cleveland. I don't think he's coming over to the Coast League. So, it could be very interesting. Elvis still has another year, too. Greaves needs a contract this summer. So let's get really ahead of ourselves here. First round, the Blue Jackets have never had home ice advantage. Last question for you, Dylan Tyrer, with the NHL radio host. What is the best matchup for the Blue Jackets in the first round by entertainment value, and best matchup for their potential success in the first round? Do you want Chinnikov in the first round, is what I'm asking you, Dylan Tyrer?
Well, I would say for entertainment value, definitely. I think a Blue Jackets Penguins first round series would probably be the best. I could say a lot of teams right here, right? But realistically looking at it, it's probably going to be either the Islanders or the Penguins taking on the Blue Jackets in the first round. So I would probably rather play the Pittsburgh Penguins than the New York Islanders, given the goaltending situation in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Obviously choosing to face Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Erik Karlsson the way he's playing right now, and of course Chris Letang, that's probably not wise, especially given the all-time history between the Blue Jackets and Pittsburgh Penguins. But these teams have played good hockey this season. They've played each other tough. They've actually played a lot of high-scoring games this year, contrary to what we've seen against the Islanders, where it's been a lot of low-scoring, low-event hockey. So for that reason, give me the Pittsburgh Penguins. I think that would be fun. Really, I don't think I'm too scared of anybody in the Eastern Conference. Like, I don't think you want to play Tampa Bay just because they have more experience than anybody.
Yeah.
Carolina has obviously had their playoff struggles, but I wouldn't be tremendously concerned playing them because I still don't think they've shored up their goaltending situation.
Right.
The one thing that I really want to see, I would love to see the Blue Jackets play Montreal. I think that would be a ton of fun. And I really, really want to see the Blue Jackets play the Buffalo Sabres. Like the storylines there facing off against your old GM would be awesome.
Right.
The Sabres back in the playoffs for the first time in a long time. And selfishly, I want to go to that building when they're in the playoffs. Like, I think a game there would be absolutely electric, so fun. And I just think that could be another high event series against two teams that are brand new to the playoffs, the Blue Jackets and Sabres. So that's like my all-time favorite matchup that I would like to see in the playoffs. But round one, I think I would choose the Penguins over the Islanders.
Yeah. Eastern Conference Finals, Blue Jackets, Sabres. I'm not sure the NHL would be too excited about that, but God, a real hockey fan would love it, I would think.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun.
Could be fun. Dylan, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it, my man. I'll see you out there at the rink in the very near future. Thanks for joining Front and Nationwide. Good to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Porty. I appreciate it. Let's do it again sometime.
Sounds good, man. Peace. All right, good to be with Dylan Tyrer. Thanks for his time, and now we'll get to the Ask Porty questions. Thanks everybody for the submissions. I like this segment. It kind of keeps alive the previous Front and Nationwide where we did the live rooms, which was nothing but a conversation. Keeps a part of this alive and still allows for some interaction here. So let's get to the questions. Forgive me for having to look away here. I'm not by any means a professional broadcaster. Dar says, curious your thoughts on Dean Evason's comments this week suggesting that the team hasn't changed much. We're on the verge of going on a similar run they just went on, and that, quote, it's hard to get frustrated. It's hard not to get frustrated or pissed off. Any insight you can share into his firing? Dar, I don't think there's really any insight that hasn't been out there. Don Waddell felt like it was a better team than it was playing under Dean Evason. I think the coaching change has proven that out. I don't think that's stepping out of line to say that. I think if you're Dean Evason, if you're a coach, you have to believe that success was right around the corner. And I think you also have to be, pissed off, hurt, really is what it is. I think maybe it's sometimes hard to see your anger as hurt, but I think it's all fair, right? I mean, just put yourself in Dean Evason's position if you can, or at least try to. Just, you're struggling, your team is struggling, you get fired, and the new guy comes in and everything just goes straight up. That would be hard. It would be hard. So I'm sure I hope there's some self-reflection in there. There's listening to guys, and you know what? As time passes, he's going to become an assistant coach again very soon if he wishes to be. He's going to see his former players. He might end up coaching his former players. He can have those comments. I believe it was Pascal Vincent who talked with some of his former players about, like, where did it go wrong? What could I do better? I think that kind of stuff is really, time has to pass first. It can't be raw, but I think that kind of stuff can be really beneficial if approached the right way. Let's see here. Sean Jones says, what is the goal differential per period since Bonus took over? All right, so I did a little homework here for you, Sean. Don't say I never did anything for you. Let's first look at what they were under Evason, because that draws the stark comparison under Bonus. For Evason, first period, they had outscored opponents 40-32. That's good. Second period, they had been outscored by opponents 51-48. You'll have that. Third period, this is where the floor caved in. They were outscored 63-39 in the third period and 6-4 in overtime. Okay, so that was under Evason. Now under Rick Bonus, which, by the way, Led Zeppelin is represented here for Bonus today. We try to mix it up. First period, the Blue Jackets have outscored opponents 33-20. Second period, they've outscored opponents 31-19. And third period, 29-21. Overtime, they've been outscored 4-1. So that is, we've made note of that. They're 5-10 in games that have gone to overtime, or have been settled in overtime, I should say. So 63-39, which is what the Blue Jackets had been outscored in the third period. That's what the Blue Jackets have done to the other team. That they've got the 63-39 in the first two periods combined. So a stark difference. There's your numbers, Sean. I'll send you a picture of them too. Let's see. Randall says, I think Provorov has been pretty good overall, but what's the deal with him getting power play and overtime time over Matejchuk? I feel like it's Denton's time to take over those situations. Randall, it's a very fair point. I might argue it with you. I'll just say that the thinking behind it probably is to have a veteran defender out there. So let me separate the two, because I don't think they're the same. That second power play unit comes on typically with about 20 seconds left, sometimes 30. And Severson's out there too. And I wondered if the acquisition of Garland, a right shot, may pull Severson off that second unit. Hasn't. The reason he's out there is because they want to be at full defense posture when that power play ends. And so Provorov is certainly a more veteran defender. I think one thing you can say about Matejchuk is there's so much promise there, and I do think his ceiling is higher than Provorov's, but there have been some big open middle of the ice flubs this year, sometimes where the puck has confounded him a little bit. And he is a super skilled player, like obviously great puck control, great edges in his skating. But there are some things to clean up there. He's still a 21-year-old player, and this is not the time, I wouldn't think, to be working on things for the future. This is very much now a here and now situation. Again, I wouldn't mind seeing Matejchuk out there. I think he would do well, but I think that's part of the thinking for Provorov over Matejchuk. I know it is at the end of the overtime or at the end of the power play. Sorry. What are your thoughts? This is from long-suffering Cincy and CBJ fan. What are your thoughts on the recent change in the D pairings? Listen, bonus. A lot of coaches are say they don't really care. They'd like it to be lefty-righty, but all they want are the best pairs to work. Yada yada yada. Bonus makes no, forgive me, bones about it. He wants lefty-righty. He wants lefty-righty. I think when we've seen the changes, he's had some lefty, and for a while there was Provorov, Matejchuk on the second pair, Fabro and Goodbranson on the third. That's two lefties on the second, two righties on the right. I think when you see an egregious turnover or something happen over the course of the game where you'd want a different shot on that other side, I think it convinces him that his intuition is right and he goes back to it. Now, people wonder, like, what's wrong with having a left shot on the right side? And there's not, except the plays up the middle to you are on your backhand. And some guys are fine with that. Some guys can get used to it. It's just different for other guys that have not played it a lot. I still think they're looking for different combinations back there. We may still see some more movement. One thing I like is they're going to hit the playoffs this year with literally everybody back there has played with everybody. Everybody has played with everybody. So in the event that guys get injured and leave the game, the sort of mismatch, mix and match defensive pairs won't be, I don't think, much of an issue. Let's see here. Patrick Sullivan says, do you think the Blue Jackets are coming to a point where they need to select one guy to be the guy in net? Jets seems to be the right choice to me. Patrick, I think they're there. I think they're there as best they can be, given the schedule. What has Jets started? Like 5 of the last 7? Look at that schedule. I mean, you're going to need 2 goalies. You're wise to play 2 goalies, given the spot that the Blue Jackets are in right now, second in the Metro. They're in a playoff spot. They're defending a playoff spot. They're not desperate to get into one. Grant you, it's a small margin. But with all of these games compacted from now until the end of the season, they only have one spot on the schedule where there are 2 days without a game. Otherwise, it's every other day a game, in some cases back-to-back games. The last thing you want to do, especially if you're not in the position they were last year where you're desperately crawling to get in, the last thing you want to do is arrive at the start of the playoffs with the goaltender that is spent. I'll remind you, this is Jets' first full season in the NHL. He played a ton of games in the American Hockey League. If you talk to goalies, it just is not the same. He's coming up on 50 games here. I know certain people who didn't think he was going to get to 50 games this year. Well, here he is. So they got to watch that. They got to be wise to watch that. And I think Elvis, honestly, has been pretty good here the last, certainly under bonus, he's been pretty good. His record speaks for itself. Save percentage is below 9, I'll grant you. There's no argument that Jets numbers are better. Jet is a top 10 goalie in the NHL this season, in my opinion. If he hadn't played so many games the previous 2 years, he'd be eligible for the Calder. I think you could make a decent argument that he should get it over Schaefer, although nobody outside of Columbus may agree with that. but there would be an argument there. He's been that good. But you're going to have to use 2, especially given the situation that they're in. Oh, let's see. Okay, Jonathan Barnes says, you've always maintained that the Blue Jackets need to break the heart of the Penguins before it truly becomes a rivalry. Will this be the year? Can the Blue Jackets knock the Penguins out and kill their last push with Crosby et al.? You know what, Jonathan? If it's a great question. If the season ends today, it's Blue Jackets hosting the Penguins, best of 7, first 2 games at Nationwide. I will remind you the season does not end today. But if it comes to that, I think it's a decent matchup for the Blue Jackets. I feel strange saying that because there is Crosby over there. There is Malkin over there. Erik Karlsson's playing out of his mind. So, yeah, look, and I've said this, that we were getting back to what we've said in the first part of the pod here today. This team is built for the playoffs, says the team that's won 1 series ever. Strange argument, but I know what you're saying, and I do believe that. I don't think a regular season win over a team really breeds contempt. I think you have to play with something truly on the line, and I think the Penguins have always seen the Blue Jackets as their little brothers. I'm not sure that's going to change until little brother starts beating up big brother, and then they truly become rivals. So, yeah, let's take a couple more. I think we've got one from the friend of the program, John Buchagros, who says, let's see here. Where'd you go, Bucci? Can I buy you dinner next Monday in Columbus to talk hockey? Sure. Yeah, that'd be great, Booch. Thank you. Let me know where we're going. I'll make the reservation. And, he also wants to talk the sheer sonic brilliance of the Future Island song Seasons. Now, I have heard this, but to make sure I'm able to talk about it, I've listened to it a couple times before this. I'm hearing shiny toy guns and a little Alphaville. And those are both compliments. Alphaville, to me, has a top 10 pop song of all time, Forever Young. Great song. And I came to that song only about 40 years ago. Long ago friend at Ohio Wesleyan said, oh my God, you have to hear Alphaville. And I love that whole album, but the song that stuck, Big in Japan's a great song. The song that stuck was Forever Young. Many of you have noticed every week we kind of do a different little thing back here. This is for the coach that's 19-3-4 in charge of the Blue Jackets here since January 12th. All right, that's Ask Porty for the week. Thank you so much for all the questions. I do appreciate it. Keep them coming. Again, thanks to Dylan Tyrer for joining us. Grant Hunter, thanks for the work behind the scenes to get this thing going. David Cook with the great theme song. And how about a shout out to the boys from camp? Big Blue Jackets fan, all of them. And boy, the boys are playing arena tours now. Arena tours for camp. And they just did Tiny Desk, which is the greatest. NPR's Tiny Desk. Check them out. Camp 2A's, as in Aaron 2A's. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been Front End Nationwide. We'll talk to you again real soon.